And Natalie will be about 2 or 3 more minutes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you.
You'll be able to see some of them soon, once I set up the other computer.
Right. I'm just reading. You've got some printer problem.
Yeah, but Naomi's sorting it. That's why she's late, I think.
Oh well, Naomi sorts everything out. She's gorgeous.
Yeah, no, this printer, it always acts up. I think I just got convinced to leave it here because I was gonna bring it home. But I think it's not worth it now.
So where's home in Israel, Yaakov?
Israel is home. Doesn't really matter where.
That's a good answer.
We're going to Yerushalayim.
That's very good.
Great.
Recording in progress.
We're going to cut them on. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to move to the middle this time, and that way we can only use 2 screens. Yeah, that is otherwise occupied, so you guys will see that.
You're putting the kids to sleep to bed.
We'll do male and female. Just because that's how people sat. I don't tell people what to do. Okay. No, because the subject matter is just so holy today.
Yeah, must be that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get started and Naomi will join because I don't like punishing people for coming on time, even if she's coming late to me. Does anyone want coffee and tea? Okay. If you want, you can get it whenever you like.
Late this week.
Yeah, I know, it's dangerous.
Great, isn't it?
Last week I was going to make you milk cookies and then I didn't get around to it. And then this week I couldn't because I didn't want to risk it.
No, that's right.
Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. So, I want to, before Naomi comes, I want to run through a few things that we said last week, but really didn't explain. But I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I got some feedback from last week saying, I talk too fast, I say too much, which is what I always get. So I'm going to try not to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to sacrifice a little bit of knowledge for depth. Just as soon as my computer remembers that I own the Zoom, I can share the screen with you. Meanwhile, it's not doing that. Okay, so meanwhile, what I'll say. So last week, one just tiny thing, I like saying it because I think it's important. So the Shulchan Aruch is the book in English, apparently. I didn't know this actually. Naomi Goldman watched the Zoom, so she told me that. And the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch in English is called the code, the Jewish code book or something like that.
Code of Jewish
law. Code of Jewish law.
That's not what
Yeah.
it means.
Yeah, which is not what it means. So that's why I wanted to say what it does mean. So Shulchan Aruch, what does it mean?
Laid table.
The laid table, right? So as Natalie can't see, but like I set the table before you came. Ariella set the table before you came, and I put stuff on the table, so everything's ready for you. And the idea is that the book is supposed to be laid out for you, so you don't have to lay it out, which means you don't have to learn all the Torah. Somebody learned it for you. Which, funnily enough, is also what the Maimonides thought when he called his book Mishneh Torah. It's the same idea. He's saying we are giving you a shortened version of the Torah, which covers everything. Obviously, immediately afterwards, we have to fix it, we have to change it, but that's kind of the idea. So I just wanted to note that tiny thing. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about a few things from last week. I might not do all of them because they take too long. And then we're going to talk about the whole idea of what a rabbi is. We're going to give an example of how we learn. This is kind of continuing what we did last year. We understood how Shabbat is learned. So this time we'll do how Kashrut is learned, but this time you'll have to learn it, and I'm not just going to tell you it. And then hopefully I'll at least do history of the Jews. The Jewish calendar is, there's no chance I'll get to it, but I'll try. I'm going to start from Shabbat because you didn't see the slides last week because it didn't work. This is the Mishkan. Okay, the Mishkan is the temple that was the traveling temple. As you can see, it's built out of lots of little pieces, so they could take it apart, move it, put it back together. And the Mishkan is where we learn all the laws of the Shabbat from. Hi, you didn't miss much, but we did start. Because even though it's my fault you're late, I don't like starting late. So okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. Really much appreciated. Oh, you could move a chair if you wanna. Okay. Whatever. We're not putting men and women on different sides. It's just that's what happens.
no.
Okay. I'm actually gonna put this here, and that way you can see better. Okay. That's better. So we just started. I said something interesting. You'll have to listen to the recording. Oh, more people. And now we're moving on to Shabbat. So Shabbat we glazed over last week. I'm going to glaze over it again today, but I do want you to understand the kind of fundamental idea I wanted to show, because later when we'll learn about kosher, we're going to have to use those fundamentals. Somebody who takes off their shoes, it's... Oh, okay. Robert, welcome. Have you been here before? That's okay. Okay, so Shabbat, there's only one law of Shabbat, okay, which is the law of melach, right? You're not allowed to, we don't usually separate men and women, that's just what happens. But you get to sit at the head of the table. That is the broken chair, I'm warning you. That chair is broken, okay? So be careful. The seat's also. Okay, yeah. So there's only one law of Shabbat, really. There's one other thing, but we won't really get into that, which is called melacha. You're not allowed to do melacha on Shabbat. We mentioned that in passing last week. But what's important is that all those melachot, where do they come from? They come from the Mishkan. So the Torah says that in the Mishkan, we do melacha, and the Torah says that on Shabbat, we do melacha. And because those words are used in conjunction, we understand that Hashem is saying that you can't do those things of the Mishkan, those melachot, on Shabbat. This is not true. This is an oversimplification. I'm just giving you kind of the general idea, okay? And that is kind of the essence of all the laws that we have of Shabbat. So here, this is just from a book for kids about the laws of Shabbat. Oh, you can't really see, guys. So this from a book for kids about the laws of Shabbat. So it shows the different parts of the temple and how each one of them is involved in the melachot, in the building of the temple, or the work of the temple. But this is kind of an easier way to look at it. So here we have the table of melachot. So there's 39 melachot, lamed tet in Hebrew, which you may have heard before. Okay, and the green ones you'll see are there's 11 of them. They are the work that's involved in making food. Okay, so it's from planting, right, from plowing and planting, all the way to harvesting, baking, etc. So those are the first 11. Then the rest of the kind of the main column over there, all the blue ones, are the work of creating canvas and clothing. Hello? Okay. Sorry, a second. You can read them meanwhile. I was busy buying our flight back to Israel. My phone has to say yes. Okay. And then, so that's the melachot of melachot. Again, I'm saying it in Hebrew on purpose. We talked about it last week. It doesn't really translate, but kind of like work. So these are the creation of making clothing, and so bleaching and cleaning the wool and all those things that are involved. Then we have other things that have to do with working leather, okay, which involves also killing an animal, but everything that's involved. And then on the right-hand side, you have the more kind of esoteric, I'd say, or whatever, which are more specific. And you'll see that they're paired, right? So we have lighting fire and putting out fire, and they're kind of connected, as you can see, but they are separate things, writing and erasing. And then I'm going to skip to the bottom, building and destroying. And then the two other ones, makeh v'patish, one of the worst ones, because most of the contemporary problems we have today have to do there. Like, for example, there are other opinions that say you can't open this bottle on Shabbat, and the reason is makeh b'patish. Sfardim say it's fine. Ashkenazim don't know that it's a problem often, so do whatever you want. I don't open it, but it's really fine if you do. And then the last one.
Now we know it, though, isn't it? Isn't now we know it?
There are opinions that say it's okay, and I don't want to challenge you right now, and I didn't tell you why. So if I said it's okay, then you shouldn't trust me anyway, because I'm not the rabbi here. And the last one, the red one here, is hotza'ah, which is the biggest problem we have, which is taking stuff out on Shabbat, which is carrying, etc. So these are the basics. And what I kind of explained last time is that all this comes from that one word, right, from melacha. That's not true. It's a little bit more complex, and there are lots of sources about Shabbat, but most of them don't really discuss these specific melachot. The only melachot that are actually discussed are hotza'ah, which is not exactly discussed, but you see, now I'm talking about things you don't have to know. But the rabbis really wanted to prove that it's in the Torah, because of all these, it's uniquely different. Do you see any difference in it compared to all the other ones?
No, for example, like for me, it's hard because it's in Hebrew, and
but I gave you the cliff notes, right? Making food, making clothing, making killing animals and making stuff out of them, and then building houses and destroying them, making fire and destroying it, and making lighting and destroying it.
You're not changing something.
But
You're
the
not
only problem
doing something, you don't creating something that didn't exist before. It's
right. So we're not doing something that has kind of a real effect on the world. We're not altering something in the world, right? So creating is a little bit complicated because, for example, fire is not a real, it doesn't have essence. So like we can say, okay, that's not creation either. But actually fire is also unique. But anyway, so hotza'ah is that only one that doesn't create, like you say. And therefore they wanted to say, no, the Torah actually says this so that people won't kind of question it, because it's called like a soft melacha. And then the other one that's specifically special is fire, which is also mentioned in the Torah. And the various kind of conversations about why that's mentioned, which we can't go into right now. So that's the kind of the short of that. This is the first Gemara that talks about all these melachot. We're not learning it. I'm just kind of showing you that this is a Talmud. This is where we got it from. We're going to learn kashrut soon, so you'll get to see that. And I'm going to glaze over this too. It's interesting, but whatever. And there is one more law called Tchum Shabbat, which isn't really a melacha, which means you can't leave the city on Shabbat, more or less. And if you want to know more about it, we can do a whole course. Skipping that as well. So meanwhile, what we did is we skipped a lot of things, but the essence of it was that we understand that Shabbat comes from one place in the Torah. That one place turns into 39 places plus one. And the one other thing that I didn't mention is that each one of these is actually the essence of why we can't do the things that we do on Shabbat. So for example, why can't you drive on Shabbat?
a fire.
Okay, so that's a regular car, right? What about an electric car?
Makeh b'patish.
Spark.
Okay, so you said makeh b'patish, because makeh b'patish is one of the reasons that we say we can't use electricity on Shabbat, so you can't use electric because of that. Not everybody agrees that it's makeh b'patish, so there are other issues, right? And there's another thing that kind of comes into play, which is all what we call the Rabbanan, all these laws that aren't from the Torah. One example of it is uvdin dechol, that we're doing something that is a chol thing. Chol is the opposite of Shabbat, so Shabbat is kadosh, and chol is sand in Hebrew, right? But it also means not special, right? So anything that we do on during the Shabbat that isn't kind of sanctified is kind of suffering from unspeciality kind of thing. So we shouldn't be doing things the way we do them on Shabbat. So even some things that are in some way allowed, we still say we don't do them. And one of the reasons is uvdin dechol. So like, for example, people say you shouldn't watch TV on Shabbat even if it was turned on before Shabbat, because that's something that is a weekday thing. There are other reasons you shouldn't be watching TV on Shabbat anyway, but so those kind of, there are other involvements, and that the Rabbanan covers a lot of things as well. But ultimately, all these things have what's called toladot. Toladot are kind of like children, grandchildren of them. So there'll be the law, and then there'll be the things that kind of come out of the law. So, for example, writing on Shabbat, right? So we don't write today. Nobody here writes very often, right? But we type. So when we type, is that considered writing? So it's not. It's not considered writing, okay? Because it's not writing. But we might say that it's a toledah because it has some kind of essence of writing because you're creating text, but it's not the actual writing. Ultimately, we don't type also because we don't use electricity, so it's a different issue. But you could say maybe there are two transgressions there because you're transgressing two different melachot. And I can think of other examples, but that's kind of the essence of Shabbat. Now, do you feel like that was complicated or kind of simplifying what you understand now about Shabbat from what I said?
You know, what I learned before,
Mhm.
for me, it's easier than you explain now.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm saying it's not necessarily helpful to get these kind of understanding, and that's why I didn't want to go into Shabbat, because 39 things, that's a lot of things. But kind of that general idea that it comes from one, it branches out, but it does come from that one source is important to understand, because that is the essence of Torah Shabbat Bichtav, of Baal Peh, of the oral Torah. Okay, so that was Shabbat in essence. And this is where I debate. Okay, let's go straight into the learning, and then we'll go back to the other things. So what we're going to do now is what Naomi printed for us. I'm not going to force you to learn with whoever's sitting next to you, but we're going to do two people learning together. Oh, kind of. How many people on Zoom? Just one, right? Just Natalie. No, that's them. I didn't turn off the screen. Okay, so Natalie, I'm going to put this on the screen in a minute so that you can see it. And then do you guys want to just, whoever you're sitting next to, or do you want to do with Sinan maybe? Or okay, so we learned that there's the Torah, right? And then after the Torah, we have the Navi, the other books in the Bible. After that, we have the Mishnah. And then after the Mishnah, the Talmud. After the Talmud, we have the books of law, right? And after the books of law, we have the commentary on the books of law. So those are the things that we learned last week. What you're going to see in the colors here, so the green, the blue, the whatever that first color is, yellow is the Torah. The next one is the Talmud. And then it goes to the books of law and the secondary books of law. Then it actually goes back here. But that's kind of the general idea. And then the last one over here is contemporary, right? So it's going to be actually something that was written in our lifetime. Okay, so what you have here, don't look at it yet. Natalie, I'll work on putting it on the screen for you now. So what we have here is an example, just like we did Shabbat. Now we're going to do kosher. We're going to see the one and only source that tells us about meat and milk. Okay, this isn't all kosher, right? There's also like what animals we can eat and what animals we can't. But let's say we got that one done. If we're talking just about meat and milk, this is the only source in the Torah for meat and milk. So what we're going to try to understand is where we went wrong, right? Where things went complicated from the simple, okay, you can't eat meat and milk, to whatever's after that. So we take the Torah, we'll see the Talmud after that, and we'll see how it becomes the law. There will be stuff here that will be surprising to you, and there will be stuff here that's a little bit complicated, but the basics you can understand quite easily. So I want you to learn the first source in your groups, okay? And then, so you know what, the first and second, and we'll stop at the bottom of the first page, okay?
The red and the blue.
Yeah. So the left, you stop at the bottom of the left page, okay?
That's the one page.
So that's motivation. Good deal.
Sorry, Natalie, I'm just making it better. There you go. Can you see?
Thank you very much. Yes, that's better.
Gemara Chulin explains that the
that
reason
good?
this phrase is repeated three
Yes,
times
that's fine. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you.
is a different prohibition. Okay. So that's the way the Gemara works. We'll say why. Why does it repeated three times? If it could just say it once, it should just say it once. So there's a reason why it's repeated 3 times.
You say it 3 times, you shall not give in the most milk. What is yours? Change the prohibition against
So
eating
just this
meat,
now.
cooks and milk,
Yes.
altars,
Yes, we need to read this.
deriving
Yes,
benefits
and
from it, and one says to keep the prohibition against cooking.
Yeah, okay, so it's 3. One is eating, one is deriving benefit, and one is cooking. Milk and meat. Sure, very good. If the prohibition of basar b'chalav includes cooking, eating, and deriving benefit from meat and dairy, then why does the Torah present the prohibition as one of cooking in all 3 cases? Good question.
Just as an explanation of
Before explaining, the formulation of cooking demonstrates that one only violates each of these prohibitions on a biblical level, derisa, where the meat is actually cooked together. On a rabbinic level, however,
so that's
any
the 3
mixture
different
of
places it's mentioned.
And one serves to teach prohibition against cooking meat and meat. Forget that, but the benefit bit.
so derisa on biblical level,
This is a cooking, actually, not a mixing, not
Yeah.
a fight.
cooking together is the issue. Yeah, benefit and eating are not derisa
3 different
prohibitions. So
prohibitions, which is
you,
explained here.
if you did it by mistake, derisa is have to bring an offering, and just for one, just for you wouldn't have to bring an offering to the derived benefit.
One's eating, one's cooking,
Includes
one's
cooking, eating, and
deriving
deriving benefit
Yeah.
from meat and dairy. Then why does it tell
Okay,
us?
should we carry on? Yeah, top right. Are we meant to be top right already? Or we stop me?
Now, if you finish that page, just make sure that you both understand it or are on the same page about it, and then I'll talk to you about it. Natalie, we're going to stop in 1 minute. Okay, so what did you understand so
The
far?
formulation of cooking demonstrates that one only.
The prohibition against the cooking, or the mixing of meat and milk, like we mentioned 3 times, but on all 3 occasions, we're using the same phrase,
Yeah.
which is same phrase,
It's confusing.
cooking meat and others.
Hopefully this is
This
it.
is why
And on the other side of
There are then it should be 3 prohibition rather than just 1.
Okay, so I heard that you were a bit confused as well, so, but they seem less confused. Okay, so Naomi, I'll summarize together. I would like to give you as much time as you want, but I want to make sure that we get more in. So we start with a joke. We always have to start with a joke, right? So God comes to Moses, right? So we see that God comes to Moses and he says, "Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo." Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. So Moses says, "Oh, so we have to wait 6 hours between meat and milk." And God says, "Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo." And Moses says, "Oh, so we need separate dishes." And God says, "Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo." So Moses says, "Oh, so no chicken and milk either." And God says, "You know, do whatever you want." And as you can see, we will do whatever we want, which is not exactly doing less and less, rather doing possibly less and less, constricting in a way. So what do we see? The Torah says things 3 times. That's a fundamental that we understand that God doesn't waste words. If God's wasting words, there's a reason. Okay, so why would God say the same thing 3 times? We can also learn from context, and they do. They look why it shows up in the places that it shows up. But so we saw that it comes up 3 times. There must be a reason. And then the Gemara, the Talmud says, okay, what is the reason? And they come to the conclusion that they came to. So what was the conclusion? And is that the part that you weren't sure about?
No, about the cooking, if it's not cooked.
Oh, okay. I want to glaze over that part on purpose because that's really, really confusing and frustrating. Because yes, according to the Torah, at least the sources you see here, I want to clarify, we're not learning everything, okay? So don't come out of here saying, oh, wait, I learned that you can do this because we didn't cover everything, okay? But yes, according to the Torah, simply speaking, if I took uncooked things that weren't cooked together and ate them, meat and milk together, hypothetically, that would be okay. That's what's confusing you because that's not what you know, right? Okay, so just forget about that, okay? Because it's not the law and it's just really confusing, but that's true that if we just look at these lines, that's what it's saying. It's saying only meat and milk that is cooked together is a problem. And then it says, okay, so, but it does mean that if it said 3 times, that's not all God's trying to say. God's trying to say something else, and that's those things that we learn. So you can't enjoy it, you can't cook it, and you can't eat it, right? So those are the three things that they learned from it. Were there any other questions about that part? No.
What kind of meats?
Okay, what kind of meat? So you asking
Chicken includes?
So you're asking the right question because that's the next source. Okay, so you see, you already know how to learn because you have to ask the next question so that you know what the next question is. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not the next source, it's the one after that. So let's just start number 3 and keep on going until I stop you. I feel like you're lost. And if anyone wants
So if
coffee
we're
or
not
tea.
doing the blue, just move on.
No, we'll do the blue. No, I said that she was the next one, but I was being, a little bit, yeah. I'm gonna have to read it too because I read it a while ago.
Times heating, one time benefit. Praise teaches the description of cooking concerning the provision of eating and teaches that prohibition only applies when they are cooked together. According to rabbinic law, eating is forbidden in any case. The addition states a kid. It does not mean it's exclusive for the same rule applies to ox, sheep, or goats. And it also does not make the difference whether it is the mother's milk or the milk of another animal, rather the Torah deals with the common case.
Yeah, up until that point there, we haven't learned anything new, but that's the new bit, that it doesn't have to be a kid and it doesn't have to be its mother.
Yeah, because in normal life, it won't be its own mother's milk.
Oh, okay. Yeah, have you heard it before?
Yeah,
But it's still surprising.
I've also never really understood.
I must have read it many times, and I feel like it doesn't make sense.
But we only know that because
Why
we know
can't
the
they
laws
wait
today.
if
We just looked at the Torah.
And you just
that kid,
But it wouldn't necessarily be those.
So
Well, you see, that's why I'm
no,
sorry
but
that I
if
skipped other parts of the lecture because I wanted to talk about
it's only a
Midrash Halakha,
that kid
where we understand not only how we do Halakha, but also
So that's
who why
you have to
does the essence of Torah Shabbat. We don't know where they got it from because they got it from God, or they claim
it comes to extend to different species and also comes to extend to not just the mother, the Aruch HaShulchan.
But there may be more reasons that we just it's in another source that neither of us have learned.
Most of the other prohibitions are about. What is he going to tell us? Carry on.
Yeah, the provision of meat and milk is different from other provisions. One is permitted to benefit from the majority of foods that are forbidden by
It's not just
Torah
traditions.
other than
You can't cook
or
it to sell to
food grown
prevent
during the
us
first
to
years
throw
of
them
tree
away.
and cloud
if there is a
cattle from
Right.
hectare
Another
and
thing
grapes in the
not allowed.
vineyard together with other species. While meat and milk, when one is prohibited to derive the benefit. Regarding all other provision, the
Because it
prohibition
says-
includes eating or deriving benefit from them, but not cooking alone. But it's permitted to cook
Yeah.
meat and
May
milk
I,
together,
tell,
even
so
without
Did
eating
you have a lot
or
before
deriving benefit.
that
So
in Torah,
each of these two
some
provisions
prohibition
separately as well as
On a
together.
rabbinic
make
level,
another
forbidden in any
prohibition just in case
So it's
we
unusual.
will not
There are
go
only three
make,
areas
Yeah.
of food where
so
Right.
Drabanan,
you're prohibited.
Yeah, that's what we
to
spoke
derive
about
benefit.
last week.
And this is one of them.
What we called
The
yeah.
which is kilayim.
Correct, yeah.
So that's Ba'asiu Siag LaTorah in the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. So we want to do a fence around the Torah. So that's called a fence.
Yeah.
Natalie, I sent you the file. That will be much easier for you. I sent it on on the chat.
It's in the chat. Yes, I'm just opening it now. Thank
And
you.
skip number 4. It's not urgent. Just go straight to number 5. If you did 3, then go to 5. Okay.
If you
Skip this one. Okay. Oh, it's fine. No, it's not that. It's just I don't want you guys to harp on it.
it's still a prohibition.
Yeah. And the only one from the prohibited things, it includes cooking. The rest you just can benefit of them, or you can mix them probably some, but nothing includes cooking for the rest of the other.
So we kind of think, you can't eat milk and meat. You've got to wait the time, and you've got to have different vessels. Actually, so we put a piece of meat into
This wasn't
bang, that's just doing that, cooking it, heating it. We'll have to work out what cooking is, but
Yeah, cooking at a certain temperature. Thing that's
Just think it may have,
the laws from they say
Eating it because it's not kosher, so the benefit must be from selling it.
benefit, yes, but you know.
You can do 5 as well. That's the next page.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's go. Why are you taking
Is that
it?
definition of cooking? Is it the same? Or is it different Shabbos for?
So no, there's 2 definitions of cooking. So Yad Soledet Bo is what we call cooking liquid on Shabbat. So if you don't bring it to Yad Soledet Bo, it's not cooking. But for something to be cooked, it has to get to a certain stage of amount of cooking. It's not just hot, but it has to be cooked a certain amount. So let's say grapes take 10 minutes to cook. I don't know, we'll cook grapes or whatever. So if it's cooked 30%, it's considered like the minimum amount. And so there was some guy called Wendell Tsai who would eat things that were half raw, and that's kind of the minimum amount that you needed cooked. So like if it would be like a rare steak, that's considered cooked. So that's time, and then that's what we said about.
So why is that?
So do chulin, which is till the next page, and then we'll stop.
Are mentioned by the
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I assume that there was, yeah. So by the way, a first text is just the stuff that you should. Yeah.
No kosher animals or
It's interesting because they're using the shabbat and the
biblically
Talmud.
cooked with milk.
Lovely.
Or only on
You know, when they throw 2 things at it, oftentimes they know what the law is and they don't know why. And then it's right. I'm not really sure what I want to say. So like, if you understand, then keep on going.
It's very confusing.
Right, that's the concept. Yeah.
And so the first 3 years, when you meet what was by the Australian.
Therefore, prohibited eating
The tree, and he said no.
Yeah.
It's not, you can enjoy it. Even gratitude is a benefit you're not entitled to. And then for 2 years it didn't have any fruit.
It's really funny. Maybe you should be gathering the fruit going away to good life your garden. But another weird question. But like, what about, let's say I grew something in Shemitah that I shouldn't have, and then I took the seeds and grew something with that.
domesticated animals.
It seems like that's okay, but like it shouldn't be. And it's kosher. But like anything is all soft.
Sheep, chicken.
There.
Sheep. And that is the, so cooking those together, that's the prohibition, Torah. But the eating of non-kosher is not a Torah prohibition, that's a prohibition of the rabbis.
Okay, let's make sure everyone finished 6, and then we'll stop.
Yeah.
And we'll summarize. Have you all finished 6?
Yeah.
They were just chatting. So you could do 7 if you're finished, because they need to read 5 and 6. And 7 is short. 8 you can read. I might just glaze over it. So you decide.
It's permitted to cook the meat of kosher animal in the milk. The milk of a non-kosher animal, or the meat of a non-kosher animal, or the milk of a kosher animal. Deriving benefits from the mixture is permitted. However, here, the meat of an undemonstrated
I have a
animal,
question about that. I have a question about that.
often on this
That there are remains of cheese.
It seems to contradict what I said before.
or bird, and milk is not prohibited by Torah law. It is stated, you shall not cook kid in its mother's milk.
Yeah.
3 times. The
Wow.
tradition of
Wow.
kid 3 times.
No, by this way, that means that we can cook kitchen will be comfortable.
Inside.
Rabbi explained that the reason of the meat
So the natural hostel
prevent people from violating the Torah tradition. Otherwise, they may mistakenly think that all types of meat and milk are permitted to eat.
You can kind of understand that, can't you?
Not cooked at all.
That's interesting. So yeah, there's definitely a distinction between prohibition, Gerais, and prohibition of the rabbis. So Benedict 6, I guess. There's lots of Ma'apelot, Asherot, Rambam.
And cheese.
So if the meat of an undomesticated animal or poultry cooked and the milk of an undomesticated animal, animal is not prohibited from consumption, hence it is permissible to cook them together and to derive benefit from them. But it is forbidden to eat them on a rough order. People not be rest the biblical transition of Masad but eating the meat of a kosher domesticated animal, the milk of kosher domesticated animal. The literal meaning of the verse is restricted to kidding its mother milk. For this reason, say
Natalie will stop in 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Any mixture of meat and milk that is not prohibited from Torah is permitted to derive benefit.
Okay, it's theoretical.
Okay.
Then it's
So I'm going to stop you. And so what did we see? So we saw the Torah said something. The Talmud explains, derives, understands how we're supposed to apply that. Simon actually went and read a little bit of the Talmud before and after to see how they got to those conclusions, because we just saw those 3 conclusions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they do have a source themselves. And then we go to the tool, which I'll remind you, we said there were 3 books of law that the tool took to make into 1 book, right? And that, so he takes the Ran, the Rif, the Rif, the Rosh, and the Ran, the Rif, and the Rosh, yeah, and he makes it into the tool, into his book of law. The Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam. And then those, so the tool is the Shulchan Aruch, right? It's not the Shulchan Aruch, but it is that set table of all the laws. And he brings it down as law, right? So that means that the law is that not only, notice this, it's not only chicken that isn't doraita, right? Also wild animals, right? So what's a wild animal? Do you know? Not a bear, they're not kosher. Not a bear, right? But what's a wild animal? Like a deer, right? So deer are kosher, or buffalo, right? So a buffalo, which is basically a cow, right? So buffalo cheeseburger should be kosher, doraita. Okay, but I'm not supposed to tell you that. Anyway, so okay, so that's the Shulchan Aruch, right? So he said
Judaism more accessible. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but if people are kept at home, so looked as domestic.
I'll tell you my favorite part of kashrut at the end, if we have time, called Bnei Pekua, which means you can halachically, according to the Rabbanan, the Oraita, everyone eat kosher cheeseburgers, not the manufactured ones. I'll tell you at the end, it's a little bit complicated, but it might be interesting to you once we learn everything else. Okay, and this is fine. The Rabbi Ovadia will let you eat it. Everyone would. He won't let you do anything now. But so the tool says the Oraita is this, the Rabbanan is that. Basically, he's taking the Gemara, turning it into canon law. The Aruch HaShulchan, I'm not really sure why they brought it here, so we're going to skip it. And then we go to Mishnah and Chulin. So we say Mishnah. Remember, Mishnah comes before the Talmud, right? But it's also the Jewish law, but in the kind of pure source before it becomes our canon law, right? So he talks about how. Does anyone want to explain what they learned in source 5? So what I wanted you to notice, I'm not sure why they brought it, but what I wanted you to notice is the last line, right? I asked you guys to learn together, right? And why do we learn Chavuta together? One is it's easier to learn with somebody else because then you don't get distracted by your phone, or you don't, decide that you don't feel like it this week, right? But also because sometimes one understands something differently than you do, and that way you understand. So before, if you notice, we said that it says 3 times to tell us the 3 prohibitions. But if you look at the end here, it says, what does Rabbi Akiva say? Rabbi Akiva says it causes 3 exclusions. So he understands the Torah already differently, and he has a different a different way of understanding the Torah all the way back to there. So Rabbi Akiva is the end of the Mishnah, the beginning of Talmud era. Okay, so this is a long time after the Torah was received, and we already have more than one traditions of how to learn the Torah. They don't necessarily get to different conclusions, but they already have different understandings of how it comes. That's complicating us, but to kind of summarize what is interesting to us, okay, so we understand that we have these different reasons that we brought, that we say, okay, so we don't eat birds and wild animals, just like we don't eat meat. For what reason? Because we might get mixed up, right? So that's a siag, a fence that we spoke about last time from the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. And then what was the other thing that we added, right? We added that, and what's the other prohibition that the Rabbanan add?
Benefit. Yeah, benefit.
No, so that's still right. You can't benefit. But the other one is what you mentioned, that you can halachically, it seems, eat a cheeseburger. No, a cheeseburger is problematic, but let's say a salami sandwich, not a salami, a salami sandwich with cheese on it, or a BLT, but not bacon, whatever, because that's not cooked together. It's cold. It's not going to cook each other. So it seems like that's okay. So those are the 2 kind of fences, and they both coincide to make, for example, that you can't have a cold chicken cheese sandwich, right? Because according to just one of those, that would be okay, but when they both coincide. And what is important to notice, that if they coincided, but they were what we call gader legader. So for example, if I said, I don't know, let's say I tell my kids, no juice in the living room in case it spills on the floor, right? And then they add another prohibition to that, or for example, we have this in the Torah, right? So Adam and Eve are told not to eat from the tree, right? And they extend it to not eating from any tree, right? So if we overextend, so halachically that's considered a problem, a double extension. Here it's not a double extension because they kind of coincide, but they're not double extensions. So that's how we get this law where we can't have any cheese with any meat in any way. And this isn't to teach you in order to make you really frustrated with Judaism. It's to teach you in order to make you understand where this Judaism comes from. It's still, just because the rabbi said it, it doesn't mean that it's not what God wants, which is a whole nother issue, which we won't get into. We will get into one day if you're still interested after I leave, but right now. Okay, so that's that. And then let's go back to the law. So Rambam says the law, right? And who wants to summarize number 6? Rambam, Maimonides, 12th century. Jewish tradition says that Moshe ad Moshe lo kam ke Moshe, that Moses, Maimonides, Moshe ben Maimon was the biggest rabbi since Moses, so this is
whatever's
as good as it gets.
Whatever's not prohibited by the Gemara is prohibited by the rabbi.
Exactly. But which is important to notice that sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes it's not that it's prohibited by the rabbis, rather the rabbis through the oral Torah tell us this is prohibited by God, just, but in this case, no, it's a rabbinic prohibition. So technically it is possible that if we had the temple, if we had the Sanhedrin, right, the court of Jewish law, they could annul this takana. They could say, no, that's no longer correct, because nowadays our chicken comes in a package and we know it's chicken, and it's no longer a problem. That being said, there's some who would argue that even today it's an issue. For example, kitniot, which you may know from Pesach, is an issue today as well. People like to say it isn't, but it is an issue, and I can tell you lots of examples. So it's not always so simple to say, oh, what was true then is no longer true. But I don't want to dig too. I do, but I don't want to dig too much today. So in 6, did anyone manage to remember what they learned? This is why we do Chazara. We go over it more than once, because you did just learn it, but you don't remember. Okay.
And domestical animals.
Right. So he brings it all together and says all those things that we can't do, right? But, and this is an important side note, right? 7, right? The Rama. Remember who the Rama is? Anyone remember from last week? I did say a lot of names, but who was he? Okay, you remember his name? Very good.
So Krakow is the head rabbi, chief rabbi of Krakow, about the age of 22, wasn't it?
I believe you. That's not my forte.
He wrote comment on Shulchan Aruch.
Very good. Okay. So the Rama is the codex of Jewish law, right? Because the Shulchan Aruch plus the Rama makes it the codex of Jewish law. So the Rama makes an important point that if it's the Rabbanan, right? So for example, this cheese and chicken sandwich, or I don't know, whatever you cook chicken and cheese together. I'm not really into that, so I don't know. So that is only a rabbinic decree, and therefore you're allowed to enjoy it. So for example, I can open a non-kosher restaurant and serve chicken and cheese, right? I just can't eat it, but I can enjoy selling it to other people. And this is, if you just read it as, in the book of law, then you're like, okay, I don't know where he got it from. Just like before we said we didn't know where the Talmud got that. But once we saw all this, so we know where he got it from, right? It's very clear where he got it from, because it comes from all that stuff from before. And that's the most important part, because once we understand how this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, you know how everything is, and you know how the rabbi answers questions, and you know how we get to source number 8, which you guys were reading and laughing at, right? But that's great, because source number 8 is exactly that. And before we do source number 8, I'm just going to show you this book, which is going into the list of books that you guys can take home, because I don't want it. So this is one of 3 volumes called Lamentet Melachot. There's 39 melachas, works of Shabbat, which apparently is in Hebrew. No, oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, there's a little bit of Anyway, so it breaks up each one of the melachot, and each one of them. So this has like 20 of them, but there's 3 volumes, and each one of them explains exactly how it works. Let's just take an example in English. So. What happened in the Mishkan, like how is it used in the Mishkan, and then how that breaks up, and what's the Toledot and what you can do, and there's examples of different things. So here, this is like sewing. So can you use a pin, and can you use this, and can you use that? Or like here, for example, putting on a bandage on Shabbat. So if you're allowed to do it, and how does it work with relation to that melacha? And how do they get all these laws from this? So like they have the Talmud that teaches them how it works, the book of law that teaches them what was the decision. And that moves on. So that's the same thing we see here. Yalkut Yosef is, anyone know what Yalkut Yosef is? You should know. It's the party book of law. Okay. So Yosef, Rav Ovadia Yosef, right? So he was considered the biggest Sephardi rabbi of the last generation. He passed away 2018? No, 2008. I don't remember. I remember an 8 in the number. The biggest funeral since I was born. Almost 1 million people went to the funeral, and he was genius. Like his memory was amazing. His opinions I didn't all agree with, but if you read his books, so it's a few lines of words and then a half a page of abbreviations where he quotes every single place where it's ever been, because he's read every book and he knows all the answers to everything. Unfortunately, he had a specific opinion of how Jewish law has to be served, and not everyone agreed with it. But either way, he has a book of law that is very concise and covers all these things. So here is his laws of kashrut, and he gives all these examples of things that aren't allowed to be done. And when you were reading them, they were maybe funny, but you also knew why he said that, because you saw where he got it from. And it was so simple. It was one page. Okay, and that's what I'd like you to see, how all this makes sense. Okay, you might think it's stupid. You might think it shouldn't be that way, but you understand why it happened, and that's the most important thing. Because when we see the Eruv and these silly strings put up around the street and how that works, we can read the laws and understand how it became that is the law. And that's really what I wanted you guys to know from all this. Any questions?
Why is frying permitted? Because it's not cooking. Is that why frying is permitted? Just as an example.
It says frying here?
It says
Frying
frying,
is
frying
cooking.
meat and milk
I
together.
think that's for their experiments rather
Oh.
than for anything else.
Wait,
Well,
Yeah, but he explained
I
why.
Think
read it as just.
He's
for
saying that it's
experiments.
already cooked, and there's a law that says "En bishul achar bishul."
Okay.
But just a note, this isn't true. This is for Sephardim. For Ashkenazim, we do have bishul achar bishul. So it's complicated. So
So not just experiments.
in this case, I would say because there's a chance that it is low, so then like it's they don't have a reason to assume that it would be a problem. So it's. I would say it's okay anyway, because there's a machloket, there's a different opinions, and anyway.
It's okay.
No. What he was saying here is if I fried it for an experiment to check,
Yeah.
not for eating.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then he's saying, okay, so you're not in that
So-
case.
It's bothering him because he wants to know, can a Mars bar be made kosher?
Deep fried.
Right, so he has to work out what's in it.
And he can't trust them. He has to actually.
Yeah, you have to actually look. So he cooks it to separate out the things. And the question is, if it's got meat in it, so maybe he's deriving a benefit. He's not going to eat it, but he's doing something that will let him say lots of people can eat it or can't eat it. That's what's worrying him.
Okay. Very
Okay,
good.
so lastly, I mean, I showed that already, but this is a book called Shmirat Shabbat Kehilchata, Keeping Shabbat According to its properly. There are 2 volumes, but the second volume is mainly positive things. So, and it's not. This is the main deal. This book comes out the 70s or 80s, and it is the first kind of, again, like it's a Shulchan Aruch for Shabbat of today, right? But it's done already scientific. So we have Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which was one of the biggest rabbis of that time, who is also, I think he has a master's in electrical engineering, and he knows what he's talking about. And all these things have been, triple checked and covered all the different laws of Torah. So it's going to take the beginning starts with cooking on Shabbat and all that, and it tells you exactly what you can do and can't do. And there's very little law, right? And there's lots of footnotes saying where it comes from. And each one of these, if you'd learned those parts of the Talmud, you would know. So like if he had one on kosher, so you would see that where it came from. It's exactly that. And it's just like, for example, if you read all this, you would know almost anything that comes up on Shabbat. I will say that
we need to learn Hebrew.
well, they have it in English. They have it at UHC has it in English.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
There is. It's available also in English.
One thing about the book is that the first edition was
No, we don't. But
He was-
it's available online.
he was Haredi. The first edition was pretty makel, pretty lenient, but a lot of Haredim didn't like that. And the edition you can find today, CHH has first edition. The edition you'll find today is more stringent. So it's good to know that not everything it says in the book is what you have to do, but it's a good starting point. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a minute. Take a deep breath, ask you guys if you want anything to drink again, and ask you how much longer you're willing to stomach tonight, and then we'll decide what to do from now on. Can we do another half an hour?
Sure.
For me, it's interesting.
Okay, most of the people said yes, some of them didn't answer, so they're stuck. Coffee, 2 minutes, and we'll start again?
Of course, thank you.
Okay, so take something to eat or coffee or whatever. Natalie, go get yourself a coffee. We won't say anything until you come back.
Yeah, Yaakov, if I may, I've put a question in the chat for you.
Oh, don't do that. Just talk. How did it come not to include fish when it included chicken? So I'll give you a scientific answer and a non-scientific answer. So the scientific answer is very simple. Fish smells. And so you can tell the difference because in room temperature, okay, because fish in room temperature smells already, while meat doesn't immediately. There's a scientific reason for that because the body temperature of fish is lower because they live in the sea, while whatever, I don't really remember that. So that's kind of an easy way because they could have actually known it's different. I'll give you another answer, and again, this isn't the answer, and if anyone else has an idea.
Okay, I'll see if we can get you some data.
But another answer is that
Right,
so we can say whatever we want as rabbis, but if people don't do it, then it won't work. So because of that, they may have at some time said you can't do that, and people didn't abide by it. For example, there is a law that some people keep. This is a great example because I'm talking. There are a lot of things where nobody keeps, but here's a law that some people keep. So you are not allowed to have milk and meat, right? But some people don't have meat, milk, and cheese. Meat, milk, and hard cheese and fish, right? Or cheese and fish at all. Some people, most people actually don't have fish and meat at the same time. They will have it at a different time. But more importantly, hard cheese, okay, you're supposed to wait 6 hours if you wait 6 hours between hard cheese and meat, okay, and most people don't even know that, okay. So
that was 30 minutes.
no, hard cheese, the not the regular, not any kosher cheese you can find here, but cheese you can get in Israel. But like I had a friend who wouldn't eat, meat after lasagna because he considered that hard cheese, even though I don't know why he did that. Or he wouldn't eat tuna lasagna because he wouldn't eat cheese and milk. But most people didn't accept that, even though it could be. So those are two possible answers, but it could also just be that it doesn't look the same. Like I'm a little bit allergic to fish. I can always tell if there's fish. Like I can have a slice of pizza that had anchovies on another side of it, and I'll feel it. So I don't know. I can give you lots of reasons, but okay, nobody got up for tea, so I'm continuing. Okay, so, but if you have any more questions, just talk. Natalie, when we're done, delete that file because I don't have permission to share it, okay? Okay, so until now, we looked at an example of how kosher works, and we understood how halacha goes through the generations. You're welcome to keep this page if you like. And where are we now? Grapes. Passing the grape. Grape for that.
So you can also try this.
Freshly baked cookies. Okay. So let's do be your own rabbi. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question. What is a rabbi? Natalie, you're first. What's a rabbi?
A teacher.
A teacher. Okay, so that is the correct answer. Okay, but what is a rabbi in today's words? Like my colleague here, Robert, insists on calling me rabbi for some reason. Okay, why does he do that? I've never ever introduced myself to him as rabbi. So why does he decide to call me rabbi? Anyone know?
Because he teaches.
Because he's teacher.
Okay, is that why?
It's because you've got smicha.
I was going to say you must have smicha.
I don't. But okay, so there's another option that is the word chacham, which actually is an interesting thing historically, because when we say talmid chacham, right? So that's a misnomer. There's no such thing as a talmid chacham. There's a talmid chachamim, okay? And talmid chachamim, if you've ever heard that word, means a talmid chacham, if you've heard it maybe in the English version, right? Which is somebody who has learned from the sages, from the chachamim, right? That's why there's no such thing as talmid chacham, because it's not about you're smart. Chacham means smart, rather that you're learning from. Chacham is both smart and sage. So talmid chachamim. So a woman wouldn't be a talmidah chachama, which you'll see some people say. Sometimes she'd be a talmidat chachamim, or chachamot, if you want to say it in very modern Hebrew. So exactly. So you could say that anybody who is your teacher, right? And we've seen a lot of sources about that. That anybody who is your teacher, you have to respect. Right? So you could be my teacher and you could be your teacher, right? Because we could both have taught each other something. And once you've learned something from somebody, you respect it. well, you should respect everyone anyway. But so what is a rabbi? So if we take the context of today, what a rabbi is. So a rabbi is the smicha thing, which none of you have defined what smicha is, right? But also a rabbi is what? A rabbi leads the shul, right? What else?
Gives authority halachic or opinions.
Okay.
Answers questions on WhatsApp. As you said last week.
Yeah. Anything else?
Actually, as I learned, rabbi doesn't need to be present on wedding, on even in the shul, because whoever can lead the shul,
Right. So if we go backwards, okay, the Torah doesn't mention the word rabbi. Okay, in the Talmud, in the Gemara, and in the Mishnah, many of the people are never mentioned as rabbi or rav or rebbe, right? A lot of them are just called, like, one of the most famous Tanaim is called Shmuel. That's just his name, Shmuel. Okay, and he was the Baal Plugta, the guy that he argued with all the time, and they were considered equals. They called him Rav. That's just his name. I don't even know what his real name was or whatever. Right? Rav and Shmuel, those are just the Chavuta that argued. So being a rabbi is more, in some way, contemporary, not like this contemporary, but it's later on. And a rabbi is what it means to us, right? So back in the day, Leeds didn't have many rabbis; they had reverends, right? Up until not so unrecently, you had reverends running shuls here, including, Albie was running the shul as a reverend until 2 years ago, right? So you don't need a rabbi to run a shul. You don't need a rabbi to run a wedding, right? You don't need a rabbi to do anything, okay? Yeah. So what do you need a rabbi for? You don't, right? When do we need a rabbi? We need a rabbi in order to run a community, because it's good for us to have somebody who we know. Just like, if I'm hiring someone, I want them to have a bachelor's, because I know, okay, this person can study 4 years and commit themselves, right? So a rabbi is somebody, he has a piece of paper that says, okay, he learned all this stuff. So ultimately, like Robert said, he thinks I'm a rabbi because it seems like I know some stuff that rabbis know.
And I think you were introduced to me as Rabbi Pinsky.
Okay, I don't know who did that. We'll lynch them later.
Yeah. I want my money back then.
But by the way, it's a good debate, because I debated if I should get smicha before I came, because maybe it would give more clout to what I say. And I also debate if I should introduce myself as rabbi, because people expect different things from somebody who's a rabbi and who isn't. And I know certain people who call themselves rabbi locally who I know more than. So what does that mean when I say that? Okay, I personally don't feel competent enough to be called rabbi, which is never why I chose to never become smicha, nor did I want the responsibility of that hovering above me. It's enough to have this responsibility. But anyway, so why am I mentioning this? So nowadays, when we look to rabbi, and I can show you, I'm in several WhatsApp groups with rabbis who get asked questions, right? So I'm in a WhatsApp group with not only like a WhatsApp group for people to ask questions, but this is a group for rabbis to ask questions of bigger rabbis, okay? So this is a diaspora rabbi, it's called the Diaspora Rabbis Questions with Rav Limon, if anyone's heard of it.
Are you allowed to be in that group if you're not a rabbi?
Well, I'm a student of it. He also calls me rabbi when he answers my questions, for example, and he knows that I'm not a rabbi, okay? So, but he knows that I'm in diaspora working in a kind of position that's kind of whatever. So, by the way, it used to be considered how you speak to people to say Reb this, Reb that, right? Like Reb Tevya, right? Tevya is not a rabbi, but he's Reb, right? What is Reb? Reb is rabbi. It's just a way to call people. Yeah. So anyway, you see this group, and I see questions here sometimes like, you call yourself a rabbi and you're asking this question? Because it's become this kind of sense of like, if you don't know, you go ask the rabbi, okay? So are you allowed to play ping pong on Shabbat? I don't know, let's ask the rabbi, okay? It says it in that book right there. He's wrong, he says you're not allowed to, and you are, but it's because he says that you can't play games on Shabbat. He's not saying that there's halachic reason, he's just saying you're not allowed to play games, so you can't play ping pong. But people don't know what to do, so they go ask the rabbi. And in a sense, that's good in a community where people don't know anything. But as we were discussing at length after last big session, it's not good that we don't know things, right? So what we need to know So this is good to know how halacha works, but really what you also need to know is how to open the book and check the bare minimum before you ask the rabbi. Not only because it's kind of silly and kind of inappropriate to waste the rabbi's time on these mundane questions, but also because then you come at it with more depth, right? Because if it's just a yes or no question, then it's never yes or no. It's more complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. For example,
Yeah.
Last week we have fasts, Shabbat
Mhm.
fast. I'm taking medicines, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's okay to take medicines or no. So
Yeah.
I asked the rabbi if it's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm taking medicines,
Mhm.
especially I need to drink water after
Yeah.
the medicines. And he said, yes, okay, no problem. Yeah.
So in that case, it makes sense that you would ask because it's a case-by-case scenario. Because what medicine are you taking? Where it leads, where the fast comes out really late, maybe in other places they would have said no. There could be, this is another thing, by the way, we didn't mention, you have a relationship with the rabbi, which is important because he can understand the context in which you're asking the question. The famous story about, not going to tell you which rabbi in Jerusalem because I keep on not being sure. I think it was up front, but I don't want to, sorry, I'm hot. That's why I sat here last time. So the famous story about rabbi in Jerusalem in the, before the state, where we really didn't have any money. And he was sitting with his students and people come in to ask questions. And somebody came in with an egg with blood in it. And they asked the rabbi if it's kosher. And he looks at it and he thinks for a while and then he tells them it's kosher. And then they leave and his students say, that's not kosher. Like, why would you say that? It's not kosher. And he said, I know where they live. I know how far they walked in order to ask me if that one egg is kosher. And I know that in this case, I could be extremely lenient, even though I would have never said it was okay in other cases. There is this issue where we're trying to give a case-by-case answer, and there are reasons to be lenient in certain cases. We spoke about that as a global context in Eruvin, in making the Eruv, for example, that we're being lenient, right? Because maybe the Torah said not to, but we're saying that that's a necessity. But it's also on a private case where we say, okay, maybe for your specific drug, in your specific case, or my father-in-law, for example, lives somewhere without an Eruv, and he has a pill that he keeps in his pocket at all times because he has to take it immediately in certain cases. So he has to have it on him, so he carries it on Shabbat. But that, I don't know that medical case that he has, and we need somebody to be able to understand that. Unfortunately, oftentimes the rabbi doesn't necessarily able to understand that, and that's an important. So your case is simple. It's medicine, which is considered simple today. But what about mental health? Somebody asked the rabbi, they're anorexic and they're not supposed to fast because it hurts their treatment plan. Anorexic is somebody who has trouble eating because they're afraid of getting overweight. They're very skinny. It's very dangerous. People die from anorexia. So going to the rabbi and saying, the doctor said I should eat, and he looks at her and he says, like, he doesn't buy the story, and he says, no, you shouldn't, and he's not understanding the whole story. And you see that all the time because the rabbi doesn't understand the full context. So it's important to have rabbis who really do understand, but that's the case by case. On a general thing, and also even in your case, like, you could know because there have been books that have written about this already, but that's more contemporary. Like, we didn't have that back in the day because we also didn't have pills back in the day. Like, it's different. We do have laws all the way in the Talmud talking about like a woman who's pregnant, who smells food on a fast, and then you're allowed to feed her because she's going to go crazy if she doesn't eat. Different reality. We used to have hysteria, if you know, with Freud. It's not something we have anymore. It's a different kind of way of looking at things. But anyway, that's where the rabbi comes in. So when can you be your own rabbi? You can be your own rabbi when you learn the laws. So, and you don't, and the rabbi is supposed to be there to arbitrate, to understand the special cases, and the cases where you didn't understand. Like we were talking before about how, did the Talmud actually say that you can have a cheeseburger? Because that's what it said, right? And so maybe we didn't understand, and we have to, ask if we didn't understand. That was my spiel about the rabbi, and that's the controversial part of this session. But what I want to say is that, like, the Mishnah Berurah that I mentioned last week, right? So that's my most heavily used book because it covers most of the law. So between knowing these two and these two are the day-to-day, these two are Chagim, and then this one that we saw before is Shabbat. If you know all those, you know the answers to most questions, and you hardly ever have to ask the rabbi unless it's a special case. And like I've asked the rabbi 2 questions this year, and you'll see people ask the rabbi a question a week. There's a problem inside. And then where do your rabbis come in the city, and who is the right rabbi? We talked about before. I was saying, does a rabbi understand what the pill you're taking is, right? So does the rabbi understand who the person is coming then? If the rabbi looks at everyone the same way, right? You have to keep all the laws because that's what it is, you know. What if somebody comes? I bought these books to kind of give you different examples of things that we deal with today. So this one's in Hebrew. I'm sorry, it's probably never going to be translated, but this one's called Yehadut al-Retzef, Judaism on a Spectrum. Okay, and his contention is that he actually grew up with my brother, but he's kind of on the fringe of what we call a very left-wing Orthodox Judaism. And his what he's saying is that we can't talk about all our Judaism with regard to Orthodox Jews, because most Jews aren't Orthodox, but most Jews want to be connected to Orthodox Judaism. So when someone comes to you and asks a question that's complicated, you know, when I'm eating my cheeseburger, should I use kosher cheese or non-kosher cheese? We should have an answer to that question too, okay? Because they want to feel connection. They want to do part of it. So let's give them the best solution to that. Not necessarily, I don't love that question, right? But there's a lot of things like that. There's a lot of people who want to keep some form of half Shabbat, right? Or, you know, they feel uncomfortable with I mean, we don't have sacrifices today, but let's say they don't feel comfortable with sacrifices because they're vegetarian. So how do they relate to that within their Judaism? Or more complicated situations like LGBT, right? So how do we relate to them? They want to keep all the Jewish laws, but they have, you know, very strong problems with them. How do we relate to that? And that's something that we have to be considering, and not every rabbi is doing. This bottom book over here, published in a pseudonym because he didn't want to say who he was. I think I know who he is. It's a book about sexual relations, okay, from a Jewish halachic perspective, but it talks about real intimacy. It doesn't just talk around it. Because he said the rabbis have to address this. They can't be embarrassed to address this because it's something that's important that we discuss. Okay, that was a spiel. Any questions about that? Okay, I know that those things seem disjointed, but ultimately they're connected, because if we understand where the law comes from, then we can understand what kind of rabbis we need to solve those laws. So, kosher we did. Now, I think we'll be able to do Jewish history. So, Naomi kindly wasted all her color printer on that.
It wasn't as many as 45. And anyway,
I said 45. I meant to say 25.
I didn't think I could make it to 45, but 25 is fine.
Okay, so maybe you want one more. Let me share this with you. So this actually is online, so you can. It's actually free to use. I've spoken to the publisher and he said do whatever you want with it. I'm sending you a link, okay, Natalie? You can actually click on it and zoom in, and it gives more information. So you're getting the best deal here, actually. By not coming, it's better. Oh, now I remembered why I told you to give smartphones. So wait, we're gonna stop with this. Put it down. Take out your smartphone. Does anyone need the Wi-Fi password? Okay. So go to your. I'm sorry, I completely forgot this. We're taking 7 steps back to this. Okay. Go to your App Store, the Google Play, if you have Google Play, and if not, I don't know what the Apple Store. Okay, App Store. Okay, and write Kehati. Okay, Kehati. A-T-I. Yeah. Okay, so a history lesson. Okay, this is.
Can you repeat it again?
Kehati.
Yeah.
T-I.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so Kehati wrote. Download it while I speak. So Kehati wrote this. Oh, I took one of them out. So yeah.
K-E.
So Kehati wrote this book, okay, which you'll find in every firm house in the world, I think, today. Okay, it is all the Mishnahs with a commentary. Okay, Now, how long ago do you think Kehati lived? He wrote this book that is in every household, okay? I'll remind you, the only other books that are in every household besides the actual Bible and the commentary on the Bible is probably the Mishnah Berurah, the Talmud, and maybe the Mishnah Torah. So this is the fourth book that you'll have in every house. How old do you think he was? When do you think he lived?
Oh, he's a bank clerk in Israel, wasn't
Oh, stop it. Okay, so
I just guessed that.
Pinchas Kehati.
It
Yeah.
is absolutely
Just, I think you shared the link for Zoom, not the link.
No, I didn't share it. Just go to the App Store.
I can't find it.
You can't find
It
it.
gives me a church Bible.
Okay.
Give me all Mishnah, Mishnayot, but not Kehati.
A-T-I.
Let me see if I can share it.
Are you an Apple?
Are you on?
No.
1 second. I'm sharing it to the group, okay?
It works for that.
I mean,
Yeah.
you said you shared this link to
The
this one?
church Holy Bible.
No. I shared it to her. I'll send it to
That
you
is quite
later.
right.
1 second. Yeah, I'll send it to you now.
But it's Ivrit only.
No, it's not. There's a button on top.
Oh, where is it?
Okay, so I sent it to you now. If you couldn't find it, that should work. If you're on Google, on
Isn't
Amazon,
it for the
Android.
device because it was made
He
for an
sent it on
older version of
WhatsApp.
Android.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
So no, that means just
No.
search for it again. It will find it.
I don't know what's
Just write Kehati over there. K.
Okay, it's
Your link won't
Hey,
work.
yeah.
Oh, because it's on your, it's on it's on the group and it doesn't, nothing works on that group. So you have to forward it to something else.
Oh, yeah.
no,
Oh, I can copy it.
Kehati, and it doesn't come up.
no.
Okay, that's okay. I will check that. Okay, so hopefully most of you found it. Okay, so Kehati was wrote the best commentary we have on the Mishnah today. It's not the only commentary, but it's the best one, and everyone owns it today in their house, and it exists in English and in some other languages. Well, the story is that he was a banker, and he went to every rabbi he could find, and he said, and this is in Israel 50 years ago, 70 years ago, I don't remember. And he goes to every rabbi he can find, and he says, guys, I don't let my students take out their phones in lessons because once they take them out, they can't put them down. And I risked it with you guys, but I see the same story happening. So I'll give you another few seconds, but please put it down. I'll show you why we need it in a minute.
We're
So,
curious as to why we couldn't get it.
I know why you can't get it. I think that the app.
The app isn't.
Yes.
It's an older. It's suitable for an older version.
Right.
That's what I've.
They haven't
found out.
updated the app.
Yes, I'll have them updated for you. I'm sorry, that's unfortunate, but we'll fix that.
No.
Okay, put it away. We'll talk.
Okay.
It's my homework to make sure you can get it.
The problem downloading.
What we read.
We
There
got
is
it.
potential if we do
Yeah.
that. But it only.
Yeah, but it doesn't
translates the
work for our
title
Android.
page.
Forget about it.
Okay.
The app isn't
Mine,
updated. Not
there.
your phone.
English
It's
and Hebrew.
an old thing.
It's an old app.
Okay, put it away. I'll talk to the developer. Okay, so it's actually only been free for a few years. It used to be you have to pay for it. So Kehati goes to every rabbi he can find, and he says, we need a contemporary version of a perush, of a commentary on the Mishnah, because nobody's written one for hundreds of years, and nobody can learn Mishnah. And nobody's willing to do it. So in his breaks, he writes a commentary on the whole Mishnah. There's a banker. He worked as a banker the whole time. Nowadays, people think he's this big rabbi. He was just a banker. And his commentary is amazing because he takes all the Talmud. He takes the Talmud back to the Mishnah and explains what happened in the Talmud from the Mishnah, and even tells you what the law was at the end. So you can learn the Mishnah and get the actual law at the end. Now, very unfortunately, you don't have it on your phones now, but what I wanted to give you homework was to read the first Mishnah on your own in English and learn it, because the first Mishnah of the whole Mishnah is Brachot, right? Okay, and it teaches us why we say Shema. Okay, it seems like you already know it. Okay, but what I wanted you to experience is how easy it is to learn with this easy commentary in English. Because once you know how to learn, it goes very quickly. Because if you learn the first 10 Mishnahs of Brachot, you'll understand how the whole system works. And if you learn all the Mishnahs, then you'll understand how the whole Torah works. You won't understand all the laws, but you understand where everything comes from. And you could finish all the Mishnah in a year. I have a friend who learns 6 Mishnahs a day, and he finishes them all. Like, it doesn't take that long. It's not like learning the Talmud. So it really gives you a sense of how it all works. And if you set yourself to 1 Mishnah a day, a Mishnah is, for example, a Mishnah is let me put it in English. So 4 lines, okay, and then this is a bit of a complicated one. 4 lines and then 5 paragraphs of description of explanation. Eventually, you won't have to read the explanations because you'll understand them. You only read like some of the explanations. But if you do 1 page a day, then before long you'll have a good understanding of it. And I can give you examples of which ones you should learn, because some of them are harder and some of them are easier. Like for my bar mitzvah, my father and I learned all of Shabbat Mishnah, which is a harder one, right? But brachot is not so hard. The blessings Mishnah that starts with Shema, and it really explains a lot of things. It explains about tzitzit, it explains about Shema, it explains about all these important things. Looks like you guys you already have some of these apps, and there are lots of Torah apps out there, and there's probably other Mishnah apps. So this is, I think, the easiest and best. Okay, so that was an interlude, and now we'll go back to time under Jewish history. So what I've given you is somebody mapped out all everything that happened to the Jews. This also has an app, by the way, if you want to download it. Not now. Okay. There's research that shows that if you have your phone on the table, even if it's off, then it dilutes your concentration. And if it's like this, it's worse than if it's like this. So I'm just telling you that the best thing to do is do that. Okay, so then again, a lot of psychological research, unfortunately, is fabricated.
It's harder because I need to put back to my bar.
I did my dissertation, my master's in psychology. I did research based on research that was later on found to be fabricated. So it's an issue for me. The reason my research didn't work. Okay, so Jewish history. God creates the world almost 6,000 years ago. I'm doing this for 2 reasons. 1, because you really should know this. And 2, because you really should know what comes of this, which is what I'm going to kind of emphasize, because there's a lot to see here, but there's one thing that I want to show. So the world's created according to Judaism a little bit less than 6,000 years ago. And according to some Jewish ideas, it's supposed to end after 6,000 years. So we're really kind of almost there. If you'd been born 100 years later, maybe you could see it. So the year 0 over there is parallel to negative 3,700, right? And there are no Jews. Okay, the graph is showing you how many Jews there are in the world, and and the first Jew is Abraham. Does anyone know what year Abraham was born? A very important number.
1948.
Very good. How did you know that? Did it say it here or?
No.
Okay, so that's a good number to know, right? 1948, Abraham was born. There is, I think I remember some other important date in 1948. The establishment of India or something. So Abraham's born 1948. So you see the first 1,000, almost 2,000 years, there are no Jews, or maybe Noah you could call a half Jew or whatever. And then Abraham goes to Israel, and the Jews go to Egypt. There's 70 Jews who go to Egypt according to the Torah. When they leave Egypt, how many leave Egypt? 600,000 men, right? 600,000 men.
20 and 6.
What?
Between the age of 20 and 6.
Right, so there's more, right? How many more, we don't really know, but you get the idea. And then we make it to Israel, and when we make it to Israel, we have, if you see there in the year...
The idea that more than 2 million Jews left Egypt in less than 18 minutes that's the miracle.
So 2.5 million according to this graph. Some opinions say it could be even more, but 2.5 million get to Mount Sinai and receive the Torah and go to Israel, right? And then they get to Israel, we build the judges, and then we build the first temple. And the height of Jewish population is about 5 million there during the division of Judah and Samaria. Okay, the second the Jews get divided, what happens? They die out. Okay, why do they die out? There's wars, there's exile, and yeah, all of the above, right? But we see that the Jews prosper in Israel, right? Blue is Israel. That means all the Jews in the whole world are in Israel, right? And then when the second temple is destroyed, which we're talking now, destruction of the first temple over here, that I hope you can see it, around 700, negative 700, more or less. we get cut down all the way to 1 million, more or less. Okay, and we see some of the Jews are in diaspora, the rest are in Israel. And what happens later? Why did all the Jews leave Israel? You know?
Babylonian exile. Right?
So it says it here, but what happens? Why is there a Babylonian exile? Because it's not because of the destruction. Notice, the destruction kills everyone, right? We lose more people after the destruction, probably like 200, 300,000, right? But they're still in Israel mostly.
The prophets at the moment. No.
So there's a fast, the least celebrated fast, right? The fast of Gedalia, the third day of Tishrei, right after Rosh Hashanah, where Gedalia ben Achikam is assassinated because somebody else wants to be the king of the Jews. And this is after the temple, right? Small cohort of Jews in Israel, but most of the Jews of the world are in Israel. And he gets murdered, and the leaders, the Romans say, okay, if you guys can't even get along, sounds familiar, then you can't be here, and they all get exiled. And then from that day, there are hardly any Jews in Israel. There are Jews in Israel, and as you can see, there really aren't any times where there aren't any Jews in Israel until the Crusaders, and even then, there's some Jews in Israel that just don't make the map, right? And then we see that Jews get to the lowest number ever. In what time, and in what place? It's good we have Sinan here again. In what time and what place? I see 0.3 million.
Yeah.
Over here, 0.3 million.
Persia.
Babylonia.
If you look at the screen, you'll see where I am, okay? So the lowest number is when the Jews are in Persia. What happens in Persia?
They decide to write down the Gemara.
Okay, that's true. But what else happens in Persia? The most famous story? Esther. Very good, okay? So what happens in Purim? They want to destroy the Jews. How many Jews are there? 300,000, okay? This is an attainable task, okay? It's not something that can't happen. So when they want to destroy the Jews, all the Jews they're in Persia and in Israel. That's all the Jews in the world. And Israel is part of the 127 nations, right? So they actually can destroy all the Jews. So this is the first Holocaust. It just doesn't happen. And it's important to kind of notice that. And then what happens? So we survive that, and then the Jews start going back to Israel. That's Ezra and Nehemiah. And when we rebuild the second temple, we get a much higher population. But notice a lot of Jews decide to never come back. Okay. But what happens after the destruction of the temple? Suddenly, a lot of Jews disappear, even the ones in diaspora. Okay. So again, without the temple, we don't do so well. And again, we get down to 1 million-ish, okay, until the Industrial Revolution, more or less, okay, and that's 2,000 years. There are hardly any Jews, and hardly any Jews in Israel, and finally, the whole world population starts growing, and so does the Jewish population, and we get, the peak in the Holocaust where we get to 16.6 million, and today again we have probably around 14 plus million Jews, okay. But what we see is we have this kind of wave that goes around the temples, right? So when there's a Jewish presence in Israel, when there's a temple, when there's leadership, so the Jews grow, and when there isn't, then and it always happens the same way. We do bad, God kicks us out, then we come back, right? And this coming back is quite obvious that it's happening in our days as well, and obviously everything is centered around Israel. So obviously I have an agenda here, but what I wanted to show you is just this week's parsha, okay? And I'll stop at that, even though I'd love to talk about the calendar. So what I'm going to open for you is this week's parsha. So according to Jewish law, if you didn't do Havdalah, so you can do it until Tuesday, right? So according to the way we look at it, the parsha is was still part of last week's parsha until Tuesday. So I'm allowed to say it's this week's parsha, even though it isn't. So let's open the parsha. And I'm opening for you the fifth aliyah, which is immediately after the God gives us the Torah, right? So we have God gives us the Torah. The last line of the 10 Commandments is right, so don't covet, right? And then we're just reading the first few lines after that. So the fifth aliyah, and next week's parsha is even more Zionist, but this one's good enough, right? Sinan, do you want to read for everyone? You can see here. Yeah.
Hashem spoke those words, those and no more to your whole congregation at the mountain, with a mighty voice out of the fire and the dense clouds. God inscribed them on 2 tablets of stones and gave them to me. When you heard the voice out of the darkness, while the mountain was ablaze with fire, you came up to me, all your tribal heads and elders.
Okay, I'm gonna skip a little bit just because we don't have that much time. Okay, so we're gonna skip to here. So the Jews show a lot of devotion to God, and God says in return, may they always be of such mind to revere me and follow my commandments, that I may go well with them and their children forever. And then he says to Moses, okay, so they can go to their tents because they're afraid of God, and I will tell Moses the law, and Moses will convey the law to them. Okay, so he says, you stand here with me, and I will give you the whole instruction, the law and the rules that you shall impart to them for them to observe in the land that I'm giving them to possess. Okay, and in the land that I'm giving them to possess, I want you to notice what God says about in the land that I'm giving them to possess in the next few lines. Okay, this is immediately after receiving the Torah. Okay, so it says, be careful then to do what God commanded you. Do not turn aside to your right or to your left. Follow only the path that your God has enjoined upon you, so that this is not the best translation, so that you may thrive and that it may go well with you, and you may endure, long endure in the land you are to possess, right? So again, it's going back to land. It's saying, do the mitzvah so that you can stay in the land that you possess. Anyone want to read? My English is.
And this is the instruction, the laws and the rules that your God Hashem has commanded me to impart to you, and to be observed in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy.
So that line is saying that the law is to observe in Israel, right? So what if you're not in Israel? What does that mean? So Nachmanides, Ramban, says that the laws outside of Israel are just practice. He says that they have a lower level of obligation because the whole point is doing them in Israel. Okay, that's what he says on this slide. Anyway, continue. Just 2 more lines.
So that you, your children, and your children's children may revere your God Hashem and follow, as long as you live, all the divine laws and commandments that I enjoin upon you, to the end that you may long endure.
Just 1 more.
Obey, O Israel, willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as Hashem, the God of your ancestors, spoke to you.
Okay, and the translation says a land filled with milk and honey, but it's Israel. It's not a random land. Okay, and that's the end of that aliyah, of that portion. But if you notice, what's the next line? The most famous line in the Torah, right? Shema. Okay, so this is what Hashem is saying. Hashem is saying this is the law, and the law is meant to be done in Israel. Okay, and I'm telling you this for 2 reasons. One, because it's important to understand where Israel kind of factors. And I didn't give you the whole spiel here, but you can see it in here in history, and you can see it in the law, and you can see it in every other way that we look at Judaism. But also, and I think most importantly, is when did the clash between our reality and the Jewish law? We have to think about it also in terms of that. So, for example, up until a few minutes ago, I could have still davened mincha, okay? And this is considered early already, right? Because a few weeks ago, it was even later. A lot of Jewish law not only does not apply outside Israel, it doesn't make any sense outside. Okay, my wife comes from South Africa. She apologizes for not joining you today. She had to go to sleep. But in South Africa, Sukkot is in the wrong season. Pesach is in the wrong season, right? And it's not only there. Rabbeinu Tam, who was one of the Tosafists, which is the main commentary on the Talmud, he said that all the laws of sunset and sunrise, right, which are applied to our daily practice and everything we do, he says he completely understands them differently because he lives in France, in northern France, and he just sees the sun sets differently. It doesn't make sense. And he understands that Shabbat comes out a lot later than we think it does. He also thinks it comes in a lot later than we think it does. And it doesn't really make sense to our day-to-day life. Some people go by it anyway because they want to be machmir. They want to make sure that they're covering all the bases. But he obviously he never understood how things worked in Israel because he'd never been there. And he had to understand how to kind of apply it to their world. And oftentimes I'll hear from people like, yeah, but it's just hard. Like I was speaking to students on Yom Kippur who came to shul, students of mine from GSL, and he was saying like, God will understand because it's hard to do Judaism in diaspora, which is like a really interesting point that he mentioned, because he's right. It's very hard to do Judaism in diaspora, but the kind of the lesson that he took from that was like, okay, so we don't have to do that. But that's interesting because that might be true in the past when we didn't choose to be in diaspora. But then the question is, are we still in that position where we're not choosing, that we don't have a choice in that? So like, for example, you don't have a choice because you're not a citizen, so you can't leave, okay? But that's something that could change. But oftentimes we're stuck in a conception that we can't leave. And again, I'm not asking you guys to board a plane tomorrow, but the question is how we look at it that we're not doing that. Like, what does that mean? And how it kind of affects our practice as well. Because that feeling of that b'diavad, that what Ramban says, Tachmanides, that it's not really clear that the mitzvahs apply here. Like you were telling me before about Ola, it's not clear that you have to keep Ola outside of Israel, or Chadash, or all these laws. And what does it mean when God's saying you don't have to keep these laws outside of Israel? Like, so why do those laws exist? What's the importance of that? So there's a big disconnect on a daily basis between our practice, between our religion, and between how we feel and how we experience life. And because of that disconnect, a lot of times that's what makes us distanced from the religion. So it's important to kind of understand that. And yeah, I can give you lots of examples. And the reason I chose this week's Parsha is because it's this week's Parsha. If it was next week's Parsha, I would have chosen next week's Parsha because I bought books for props, right? So there's one for each Parsha because every single Parsha, every single one, even the ones before we even hear of Israel, like Bereshit, they talk in some way about how there's a land and there's some kind of focus of where our Judaism emanates from. And really, otherwise, you look at the Jewish law and you say, like, it's one of the even arguments why Judaism doesn't make sense by people who are critics of it. Because they say, all these laws, they only work in like a certain kind of place, because if the sun sets too late or too early, then it doesn't work. But that's right, you're not supposed to be anywhere else. And if you are somewhere else, it's b'diavad, what we say, it's in a specific case. So then we have ways to deal with it, right? If you're flying in an international space station and going around the earth in 90 minutes, so you don't have to keep Shabbat every 5 hours, sorry, I'm not calculating well, but 3 times a day or whatever. You don't have to put on tefillin every, there are ways to deal with that. But that's obviously, it was never, like, nobody questions that God didn't mean us all to be on a space station, right? So it's the same thing about diaspora, but people kind of have become either complacent or have become kind of, that is the only reality they understand. Like, I'll just give a last example. I went to this post office today. I had to send something in, and the last date was the 31st of July. So I come in and it said, yeah, it ended. And I'm like, no, I came to do it today. It's the last, it's the last. That's when I did it. And they're like, no, they're like, yeah, it ended today. I'm like, but I can still do it. And they're like, yes. And it's just I don't understand the language. I know English, she knows English, but that language didn't make any sense to me, because from what I heard, it was like, it's already over. And she wasn't saying that. And that's exactly how I experienced that. Like, it's just, we're not speaking the same language. Like, somebody asked me at sports day at the school here, I told them, like, we don't have sports day in this, and they're like, why not? And I was like, why, yes. It's not like, I'm not saying something wrong with sports day, it's just a cultural thing. Why would we have it? We have a different culture. So there's a distance that's in every part of our being. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna stop preaching about Zionism. So I'm gonna summarize. So, and I'm gonna show you how this was all connected, and then I'll let you go. So, and the Jewish calendar, obviously very important, but we'll have to leave it for a different time. I had the graphic somewhere. Just don't look at all my WhatsApps. It's very private. I'm very insulted. Oh, now it's going on Zoom. Actually, this shouldn't be on Zoom. I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, there we go. I'll check later if there was anything that was actually private. View image. Oh, that's the wrong image. After all that. Oh, I know where it is.
Rabbi Pinsky's. Or maybe not Rabbi Pinsky's, but that's where I am at. 142 Shabbat Lane.
Okay.
Did you get Dawson data? Oh, thanks.
Okay, there we go. So to summarize what we've done so far. So we explained how Judaism works. Let me share again so you see it. We overstepped our boundaries and ran too long. And what else did we do? Right. So we explained the fundamentals of kosher, but we saw it ourselves. Okay, part of it.
Okay,
We understand the fundamentals of Shabbat, at least in general. We didn't go into purity, which I knew we probably wouldn't get to. And we talked about the idea of how to fool God. I was going to give you 5 examples because it's really interesting. And after I say you can go, I'll give you that example that I promised about the kosher cheeseburger. That was session 1 that we finished now. And session 2 was Jewish calendar, which will stay for another time. The Jewish land, which I showed you parts of, but there's lots more, obviously. And the Jewish library, which we did last week, and Be Your Own Rabbi. So I think I more or less covered those things. What I want to do next time, and I'm not 100% sure we can do it here or on Monday. One of those two might be a problem because we're moving on Tuesday morning. We're doing the list. What I want to explain next time is philosophy, because we went into religion, we went into law, we went into kind of where the law comes from, which is very important. We touched with the rabbi saying how the philosophy is involved, right? That we have to understand where people come from, but also, for example, if I'm a Zionist rabbi, right, then how that affects my thought. There's a new podcast that started this week, the thoughts of Cook. If you're interested, I will send you a link. I'll send you a link anyway. So understanding how Jewish thought developed in the last 2,000 years in 20 minutes or less, and to show you kind of how that library works, which is not, law, but it affects law in every single way. The holy hyphen is understanding what it means to be a modern Jew, because the hyphen is what's important, and ultimately to tell you where we go from here, hopefully. So that's that. Thank you. And just leave if you want to leave. And I'm just going to tell you the one thing about the kosher cheeseburger. So according to Jewish law, if you check a cow, okay, and there is milk in the cow's stomach, what is the halachic status of that milk? I shech the cow. There's milk in the cow. So what do? They throw it out. But they don't have to. What's the status of that milk?
Do you mean like it's a baby cow that's just had a feed from its mother?
No, sorry. In its not in its stomach, in its in the udders. The udders are full of milk. Okay. I shech the cow is kosher. I mean, I have to kosher or whatever. Cow is kosher and it contains milk within it because it's in the udders. Okay. What do we do with that milk? Okay, so that's not true, but that's what we do. But that's not true. What is the status technically of that milk?
Well, it's part of the meat.
So it's meat.
Yeah.
Okay, so that meat is flesh. Okay, so if I took that milk and I made cheese out of it, that would be fleishig cheese. Okay, not milky cheese, fleishig cheese. If I drank that milk, I would have to drink it with a meat meal, not with a meat with a. Okay. So that's half of it. Okay, so now we can have a cheeseburger, right?
Okay, but
this is law. This is no. There's no problem with
it. We can't count it as a meat because it will be meat.
Why is the milk in the udder fleishig, not milk?
Because once I shech the cow, everything that is cow is meat. Because it's in the cow. If it were out of the cow, it would be milk. Okay?
It hasn't separated from the cow yet. It's still.
Because think about it, before it was milk, right? What was it? It was digestive juices and whatever, right? It turns into milk. So a second before, I think it actually comes from blood a little bit or whatever. So that blood is fleishig, right? Well, you're not allowed to eat blood. That's a different story, right? So it turns into milk. It's only Jewish milk, right? When it comes out of the cow. And this is an example of a loophole, right? Because it's not exactly a loophole, but understanding that there has to be a line when it turns into milk, right? Because until it comes out of the cow, it's not milk. So if you shech the cow, it's still flesh. Right. Okay, so that's how you have a kosher cheeseburger. But wait, that's the easy part. Okay, how do you have a cheeseburger that you never shechted? Okay, So what if I shechted the cow and there was a cow in the cow, right? A pregnant cow, so there was a cow in the cow, okay? What's the status of that cow?
Just part of the original cow.
Because that cow, I can birth it, right? And it can be alive, right? So I birth the cow is alive, right? What's the status of that cow?
It's treif.
Why?
Because it's in the mother's milk.
So that cow is in the womb, right? We birth the cow. Now that cow can give milk, right? The milk that cow gives, what is it? Is that meat or milk? Still fleishig, right? Because it came out of a kosher shechted animal, right? Can't eat that cow because it's alive. You're not allowed to eat a live animal. Has nothing to do with shechting. That's a law that also non-Jews aren't allowed to do. But wait a second, we have another issue, right? That cow, do I have to shecht it in order to eat it?
Cow or
The baby.
Baby.
If I want to eat that cow, it has to be dead, right? But can I shoot it? Do I have to shecht it?
You can probably shoot it because it's not born. So
Right. So it's because it's not born, it's already shechted because it's part of its mother. And therefore that's called a ben ku'ah. No, it's alive.
Assuming
We birth it. You know, after you kill the mother, you birth it, right? So the animal is alive. You can raise it until it's ready to be eaten, whatever. And then you can shoot it in the head and you can eat it. Why? Because it's already been shechted inside the mother. Okay, so that's called bnei pekuah. But now what if instead of shechting this, I raise it and it has children and lots of children and I make a whole flock? Okay, so I can make a whole flock of pre-shechted cows. Okay, this is completely legal. Okay, so now I could make a flock of pre-shechted cows, make all the cows in Israel pre-shechted. Okay.
Hold on a second. Except once you brought the baby calf out of the cow, you then gave it life. So surely you then have to shecht it.
It already has a halachic status of shechted meat.
You shechted the mother. It wasn't exactly born.
But you're wrong.
You didn't have to shecht it because it wasn't alive. But once you then gave it life, you then
it wasn't born.
Delivered in the dawn.
It's probably the wording. It was separated, not born.
There is no difference between that and the calf.
You're still treating being shechted as a hereditary characteristic, and I'm not sure that that's right.
So that's the Gemara. It's called bnei pekuah. You're welcome to read it. Okay. So there was at the beginning of the state, somebody said, let's do that. Let's raise a whole flock, and then we won't have to have shechting in Israel anymore. Okay. Now it has a problem because then it would annul shechting, it would annul milk and meat, and we'd lose this whole part of Judaism. And people just went like, when I leave Israel and I don't know what an Eruv is, right? So I have the same problem when I leave Israel. You're not allowed to eat meat and milk. It's such a strange thing. But anyway, why am I showing you that? Because it's funny and interesting. But beyond that, to understand that there's something called lo b'shamayim here, which is a lecture I'll give you a different time. But the idea is that we have a set of laws, and even when the laws don't work, God wants us to go by those laws, and therefore God is fine with us doing that because it's according to the rules. And there's a real fundamental there, because in Christianity you really don't have it. That being said, some Kabbalics don't like it in Judaism as well either. But if you for some reason are allowed to eat a pig for some reason, then there's fundamentally nothing wrong with eating that pig. There are two opinions about this. Some people feel like there is something fundamentally wrong with that. But ultimately, if I'm going by the Jewish law, and the Jewish law says that, I'm going to die if I don't eat the pig, so I have to eat the pig. Then I ate the pig, and there's nothing wrong with me. My soul is still whole. I'm still perfect, a perfect Jew. So the same thing here. There is a set of laws. We have to abide by those laws, and that's all that comes of it. Why do we have those laws? What's the reason behind them? We can tell lots of stories, and I can tell you lots of reasons that we have. But ultimately, those are just conjectures. They're not a full story. They're a partial story. And just like I'm not going to tell you why the Holocaust happened, I'm not going to tell you why we don't eat meat and milk. And therefore, when we're allowed to eat meat and milk, we're allowed to eat meat and milk. And that's just how it works. And that's how Jewish works. Thank you for coming.
Very good. Very good.
You're welcome to ask questions. I know you don't like it.
No, question about cow, and because when cow shifted, I am not sure that the cow's baby will be alive or not.
That's true. Only if it's alive. It's Schrodinger's cow.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Schrodinger's cow.
Because
If you're interested in more of these, they're all available online to buy, but also there are a few of these that I have doubles of, so you can have them. You can have all of those. Some of those are not Jewish books, so you're welcome to take them as well. And yeah, so next week I'll send a survey. I might not want to do Monday, but I might do Monday just at somebody else's house.
Right.
Bye, Natalie.
Okay.
Very good.
Bye, Natalie.